The race for the White House has turned into a campaign about race. In the last 24 hours, both presidential candidates have gone on the offensive, accusing one another of bigotry.
Hillary Clinton has tied Donald Trump to the alt-right nationalist movement. That's an extremist group, while Trump has said that Clinton is a bigot because, according to him, she has done nothing for minority communities.
A man with a long history of racial discrimination who traffics in dark conspiracy theories drawn from the pages of supermarket tabloids and these kind of white supremacist, white nationalist, anti-Semitic groups should never run our government or command our military. If he doesn't respect all Americans, how can he serve all Americans?
Well, she is a bigot because you look at what's happening to the inner cities. You look at what's happening to African Americans and Hispanics in this country, where she talks all the time. She's talking, look at the vets, where she said the vets are being treated essentially just fine, that it's over-exaggerated what's happening to the vets not so long ago.
But how is she bigoted? Bigoted is,
well, because
is having hatred toward a
she's
particular
selling
group.
them down the tubes, because she's not doing anything for those communities. She talks a good game,
so
but she doesn't do anything.
She has hatred or
her policies
or
are bigoted. Her policies are bigoted because she knows they're not going to work.
Well, joining us now from Washington is CBSN political contributor and Republican strategist Leslie Sanchez. Leslie, what a day in American politics yesterday. Donald Trump accusing Hillary Clinton of being a bigot. She trying to tie him to the alt-right movement. Who do you think has the better of this duel at the moment?
You know, neither of them does. This is a case where both of them have mud on their boots. And what's interesting to listen to both of those, and what's great about it, is to put them in context and put them together. I think one thing voters are realizing, this is rapidly becoming a race to the bottom. People agree. Second, people have become desensitized to these very stark criticisms on race. You heard a lot of the same types of conversations and points up by other Republican contenders against Donald Trump, particularly in Iowa, where you had a KKK and those kinds of groups influencing get out the vote efforts in the state's primary. So these were echoes we heard before, and there was a legitimacy to hearing them again in the general election. What's different is there's a little bit of validity. There's a little truth in both sides.
Leslie, we know that the Clinton campaign began running a web ad yesterday, trying to tie Trump to this white nationalist movement, alt-right. Let's take a listen to the sound.
The reason a lot of Klan members like Donald Trump is because a lot of what he believes, we believe in. Donald Trump would be best for the job.
For president.
Yeah.
I am a farmer and white nationalist. Support Donald Trump.
Sending out all the illegals, building a wall, and a moratorium on Islamic immigration. That's very appealing to a lot of ordinary white people.
So we know minority voters overwhelmingly support Clinton. Historically, they vote Democratic.
Right.
So who are they targeting with this ad?
You know, the interesting part, I would think the ad's targeting women. We would say traditionally it would be swing voters. Women tend to be those swing voters. But the issue on race, if you close the ethnic gap with voters, you tend to close the women's gap as well. It has to do with cadence, tone, and inclusion. So it's a very strategic strike. The problem is Republicans tried the same measure of attack in the primary and tried to tie those same types of outside groups, you know, everything from David Duke to these paid-for robocalls, especially in the early primaries, to Donald Trump. And he basically disavowed on numerous times any association with them. You cannot help who supports you during a campaign. It can argue both sides of the aisle. So I think for that reason, it's not a fair ad. And I think Donald Trump does have a point. I don't think the bigot language helps at all, and I don't agree with that. But there are many policies. The strategic line there was policies. There are many policies the Clintons have had, particularly the 94 crimes bill by her husband, that have hurt and devastated communities of color. So somewhere in the middle is the truth.
So, Leslie, a remarkable day two story here seems to be that there are not a lot of Republicans coming forward and saying, hey, Hillary Clinton, how dare you call our Republican nominee a racist? That's too far afield. What do you make of the relative silence on that front?
You know, Trump is no favored child among the establishment Republicans or even some of the conservative Democrats. They have long ago decided they're going to distance themselves and let this candidacy as an outsider run for itself. The only people who are still standing by are Speaker Paul Ryan and Reince Priebus, the chairman of the RNC, and they have to. But pretty much everybody's run for the hills and is defending their own races down ballot. Whether it's good or bad is yet to be seen. The truth is, it's because it's so unpredictable. They could basically call for a call to action to stop this type of rhetoric, but then the next day, Trump could possibly unravel all that. So no one wants to stake their political capital.
Leslie, you know, there was some buzz that Trump was going to announce a new immigration policy. He was going to do it this week. He was going to do it next week. We know he's in Los Angeles today. He's going to hold a Hispanic business roundtable. Do you think there's going to be some rollout at some point, whether today or in the coming weeks from him?
Absolutely. That's one thing I've been hearing on the ground. I talked to folks who were in the Austin meeting. Let me tell you, a lot of the Hispanic business leaders that were in that meeting were not offended by this polling. They think it's part showmanship, and they think just it's part of his style. And what's interesting, if you talk to Latino leaders, particularly as well in Nevada, they're excited that Donald Trump is making some movement in this area and looks like a candidate who's listening to the electorate, listening to business leaders on the front lines, whether they be Hispanic or not, that there needs to be a common sense, humane way to deal with this issue. That's what's exciting, if you can believe that, these closet Trump supporters who are still not out on the front lines, but they're definitely listening to the Trump message.
Leslie Sanchez, I think you're right about that. There are a lot of people on the sidelines who may not be ready to dive in just yet, and I can understand why. Leslie Sanchez in Washington, thank you very much.
Sure.